As we march 1 year since the attack on the Capitol, we're now learning some Democrats are working to ensure no one who took part can get elected to public office. The Miami Herald reports Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Congressman Jamie Raskin are collaborating on a plan to use the 14th Amendment, which prohibits people who went to war against the Union or aided the nation's enemies from running for state and federal office, to prevent insurrectionists from getting elected. Joining me now is Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a Democratic member of the House Appropriations and Oversight and Reform Committees. Welcome. It's good to have you back on the broadcast, especially talking about this. Update us about the discussions, and what do you think the chances are that the 14th Amendment can be enacted in this way?
Well, Happy New Year, and thanks for having me. First and foremost, the January 6th Select Committee in the House continues to investigate, and with every passing day, more and more is revealed that not only was there an attack on the Capitol with over 1,000 rioters, but there was a very diabolical and deliberate plot by Donald Trump and his allies to overturn a legitimately held presidential election. And so our founding fathers crafted a provision in the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution that essentially said anyone who commits insurrection, anyone who plots against our government, should never have a right to be in charge of it. And so this incident certainly seems appropriate to invoke that section and ensure that no one that was involved with planning or carrying out the potential overthrow of a legitimately held presidential election should ever be able to seek public office.
Okay, I'm going to focus on the word anyone, and presuming that no one is above the law, could this apply to Donald Trump? Could this apply to current members of Congress, if any are proved to have been involved?
Well, Alex, I've been working on this legislation with constitutional scholars and colleagues of mine for a little over a year. We really started out just focusing on what we're continuing to focus on today, which is that anyone who is found to have committed insurrection, it's clear we're trying to not allow the peaceful transfer of power and engage in insurrection against our government, then we need to honor the founding fathers' intention, which was designed just after the Civil War, and make sure that they can never seek public office. And that should apply to anyone who committed that insurrection. Excuse me.
Okay, let's talk about the House committee, the January 6th committee, specifically preparing for the public hearings, perhaps as soon as March. I mean, as part of the House Oversight Committee, you certainly know all about high-profile hearings. So how impactful will these hearings be as the American public sees the evidence that's been uncovered by the 1-6 committee?
Well, although I was a young child during the Watergate hearings, I think those are a perfect example of how, when there has been really serious breach of our Constitution and a serious breach of the law, that the white-hot spotlight shown on the evidence that exists to get to the bottom of who perpetrated those offenses really need to be highlighted and shown to the public. And so public hearings, I think, are going to be an important way to help break through the logjam that exists right now, where we have a very divided country. There's a huge fault line. When people have an opportunity to see what really went on here and see the evidence that has been really revealed by and discovered by the Select Committee, it's going to be an important turning point for our country and the decisions that we have to make to prevent this from ever happening again.
Yeah. As we've marked now the 1-year anniversary of the attack on the Capitol, the reflections on the riot have really intensified the calls to pass some voting rights legislation. Do you think Congress is feeling the urgency here? I mean, what is it going to take to get legislation through Congress and to the president's desk?
We've had 30 different state legislatures enact, I think it's 19 different laws that totally revamp election law in the worst response to this crisis, which is that you have Republican legislatures that are trying to shape what the electorate will look like because they have a failed agenda And the only way that they can get their candidates elected is by rigging who shows up to the polls. And that's an unacceptable outcome. And so we have to make sure that we pass voting rights reform so that there is a floor through which we don't allow our voters to fall and that we don't allow their rights to be trampled upon. And I think that the House certainly has put our full weight behind that legislation. And I'm hopeful that the Senate will make the kinds of changes necessary for them to be able to pass that legislation too.
Let's talk about the president's Build Back Better legislation. It's stuck right now in the Senate, as you know. So what are the thoughts around potentially renegotiating maybe a smaller package that could gain the support of all Democrats? And as the former DNC chair, how critical is passing it in some form or another for Democrats as they head into the midterms?
Well, I'm from the school of thought that you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And the real question here, Alex, especially when you look at the electoral prospects, is why are Republicans, not a single Republican, supports this legislation to make sure that we can make big pharma negotiate for lower prescription drug costs, make childcare more affordable, make pre-K universally free, make sure we lower prescription drug costs for our seniors. We have the highest per capita.
Can I ask you about this? How is it that they're selling that to Republicans? You're pointing out each and every one of these things. There's a litany of them in this bill.
Right.
How is it that they think Republican constituents of theirs are like, yeah, I don't need any of that?
Well, remember, they also thought that with the Affordable Care Act, and they thought it was going to be really easy to just discard the Affordable Care Act when they were in charge. The Affordable Care Act has grown to be one of the most popular programs that brought access to quality, affordable health care to millions of Americans. And remember, we got all snarled up during that debate and many times thought that the chances to pass it were lost. And we came together, and we were able to put as much health care reform on President Obama's desk as we could get a majority for. And that's what we're focused on here. But when it comes down the line this election year, I know that our candidates, our members running for re-election, are going to be running on the idea that we support making sure that we can lower those prescription drug costs, make childcare more affordable, cut child poverty in half. And our Republican opponents universally oppose all of that and stood in the way. I hope we pass something, and I'm confident that we will. Whatever it will be won't be with a single Republican vote, and that is pathetic.
Always a pleasure. Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.